Good morning, everybody. When Supriya said, would you mind speaking at our conference we're having, we're doing a TEDx conference, she didn't say I was going to go first. So she's a good negotiator. My name's Slade, and my passion is international education. So I thought that's what I'd talk about today. My topic, if you like, or my question is studying overseas worth it? Bit of an interesting question, really, considering my job depends on it. I hope my boss isn't watching this particular recording, but then maybe also you might guess what my answer is going to be at the end. So what I thought I'd do is I'd have a look at it from the perspective of what international education might look like from an Indian student's perspective versus a UK student perspective, and compare the two, and see what that tells us about international education in the broader sense, and perhaps its worth. So that's what I've gone through. I'm not an academic. As you've heard, my background is working for big advertising agencies, and I was lucky enough to work overseas for most of that career. So once an ad man, always an ad man. I'm going to try and look at some insights into the data. I've done quite a lot of research onto this. There's a lot of desk research. And some of it is stuff from my own experience of working in higher education. So I'm going to try and pull all that together, if you like. So you're welcome to disagree with some of the stuff I say. That would be great, and it would be good discussion for debate here. But perhaps hopefully some of the insights will hopefully lead you in a direction where you think about something in a new way. So what I'll do is I'll have a look at some of the motivations, and I'll contrast those for India and for the UK, and maybe what some of the perceived benefits are, and have a look at those differences between the two different groups. Let's start off with the numbers. So there's quite a dramatic difference between the UK and India. 1.8 million students studying overseas from India. We just have 30,000 from the UK. I know about this in my own institution. Trying to get home students to go overseas, it's very difficult. They get used to their mothers cooking, the laundry, boyfriends, girlfriends. They don't want to go. It's quite difficult. And we have very few coming to India, which is a shame. We're at the University of Worcester. We're trying to do something about that. We have groups of students coming, actually medical students, midwives, and some education students as well. So it's quite a diverse group. The top destinations for Indian students are not, as everybody knows this, it's going to be the big four. For UK students, two of those big four come up the same. And obviously, our proximity to Europe also plays a big part in mobility. If I start looking at the motivations, it gets a little bit more interesting. So what do Indian students look for? They've got quite an evidence-driven approach. They're looking at, they want a quality education. There's quite a lot of competition here in India. It's quite difficult to find places in good universities, which does mean students are looking overseas. They want that job. They want that career afterwards. They're very focused on that. And they're going to do their background research to make sure they're making the right decisions. They want those post-study work opportunities. We all know that the education is one part of the jigsaw, if you like, and the other big piece is, the experience that you get. More recently, this is becoming more of an opportunity for the smaller cities and towns. So that's a great thing that's happening in India. That's a part of its development. And we're losing a bit at the bottom there, but it's mainly STEM subjects, engineering, and business, the main choices. If we look at the UK, it's a different approach altogether, really. They're looking for cultural experiences. it's often niche courses. Often, a lot of the mobility actually from the UK is people studying language courses. And the third year of that course, if you're studying French or Chinese, will be in the country where that language is spoken. That represents quite a large number of those, just those small 30,000. UK students also do know that it's going to have a beneficial impact on their chances of getting a job. And also, they realise that actually, if you look at the data, students that study overseas tend to get a better degree. And something that we have in common with the Indian students, if you like, in the UK, is there's much more uptake from mature students and students from disadvantaged backgrounds. So that links, I think, with the smaller cities and in the sense that this is, international education is something that helps drive inclusion and accessibility. I'm getting on to look at the benefits. I'm getting into the area of, back into my advertising days here. It's a bit more about perception here. There are studies on this, but I've pulled from quite a lot of them to try and pick out the main themes, if you like. So for Indian students, it's all about employability. These are the benefits they perceive they're going to get afterwards. Better prospect, better career prospects, access to some high quality programs, and the favourable work visa opportunities after they've studied. That's the sort of focus in terms of those are the benefits I think I'm going to get out of it. The UK students are more like, well, I'm going to develop more of a global perspective. That's going to be useful to me. Maybe I'll build up those cultural skills. I'll get diverse learning environments. It's about the opportunity to grow up a bit and become a bit more self-sufficient. But what we're starting to see here, what I want to pull this out as the theme of, I think, of my presentation, is that we're starting to see some areas of common interest. So I think both lots of students would know you're going to get exposure to a more advanced research, because by studying overseas, you tend to get that opportunity to look at different ways of approaching education and research. They often, that whole idea of this interdisciplinary study, you're already doing it because you're studying overseas somewhere, and that's going to create a broader perspective on study. And I think both groups do agree on that fact that you can enhance your personal professional development. But I want to pull out of that really and look at some of the other benefits that students get out of this. And this is, I'm getting more now into the area of where the students have been abroad, studied, and then somebody's asked them, well, what did you get out of it? These are the things you think you're going to get. What did you actually get? And now we're getting more into some of the soft areas. So when they're feeding back, they're talking about, well, I studied abroad and I think I improved my communication skills. I mean, those aren't the words they would use. I don't think any students can start saying something like that, but that's the way, if I'm going to categorize it and sort of pull it together for today. These skills of adaptability, being able to operate in diverse cultural environments seems quite obvious, but I don't think it wasn't really coming out at the front with people, their expectations of what they were going to get. The global networks. I don't know if there'll be lots of people in the room here with experience of studying overseas or working overseas. When you're overseas, you tend to gravitate towards an international group. It's strange. It's harder to match with the home group. There's lots of them, but they all have their own lives, if you like. You tend to gravitate towards the other international students or workers, and that network becomes very important, very strong. Certainly for me, that was one of the reasons I had an international career, is because of that network I developed. And also some of those practical life skills. I do the introduction for our new students when they come. And when I'm talking to them, I say, look, you're going to have an opportunity for, improving your educational skills. You're going to meet lots of people. You join all the clubs and societies. So the other thing you're going to learn is you can learn how to cook. For what, certainly Indian students, they get to the UK and they're like, really, have I got to eat this? Is this what's on offer when they go to the canteen? They're not happy. They're not happy. So they form groups and they find out where they can buy their ingredients and they learn and they get on the phone and get the recipes from home. And that's a great benefit that they get from studying that they perhaps didn't think they were going to get before they came. So this is a bit loose, this bit, I'll admit. I don't know if we're supposed to do that on a TEDx talk, but I've looked at quite a lot of data, and it's so variable, it's almost impossible to get to the bottom of it. And really, frankly, the answer to this question is it depends. However, I'll have a go. I've looked at the DSU international fees, and I've looked at the Worcester international fees for this one. So we can see broadly tuition fees, they're more expensive in the UK, but actually they're picking up in India. They're more than they would have been a few years ago. Living expenses are more in the UK, but actually they're not. There's still a significant cost here in India. Where I think it's interesting is if you start looking at what data there is for that return on that investment. There's a lot of studies in the UK about the return on studying a degree. What return does that give you in your career? And it's about 20 to 37%. That's great. That's fantastic, and that's part of the debate we're having in the UK. However, the data that I've seen for India is there's a much bigger difference between the non-degree and the degree level of return you get in your career. The expectation for a salary for graduates is much higher in India than it would be in the UK versus the people that didn't study. So there's a much better payback on that one. So if I'm going to sort of wrap it all up a little bit here, benefits for Indian students, it's all about that return. And you can see, with the data that I found, there's a much higher graduate salary premium as well, so that makes sense. That's why they're doing it. That's what they get at the end. For the UK students, it's much more about this whole experiential thing, and different motivations for doing it. And we have clearly different factors in that decision making as well about what you can afford and how you're going to budget for that and what your career plans are. So, I'm going to go back to my original question. So, no surprises here. I think the answer is yes, which is good because it keeps me in a job. And if he is watching, I'll be okay. However, we've got all these different motivations going on. We have different expectations. That's pretty clear. And there's different returns. So this is all stuff that perhaps we already know. I'm hoping today, though, my insight, if you like, is that despite all that, there are some really important shared benefits. And perhaps those aren't so obvious. They're a little bit more, I'm not sure people are going to make a decision based on these. But these seem to be the benefits that have the most potential. If you look at surveys from employers, and there are a lot of these around, what do employers want? They don't want people with degrees. That's a criteria on an application form to get an interview. That's fine. They want well-educated people. That's great. There are lots of them out there. There are lots of students applying for jobs with the right qualifications. But they find when they start work with them, they're lacking some of those soft skills. Some of the things I was talking about earlier, communication skills, cultural awareness, ability to get things done, self-sufficiency, self-reliance, those sort of soft skills, and those are all the ones that I was saying that those are the benefits that students that study internationally get, perhaps don't realise that they were going to get. It certainly wasn't part of that decision-making process at the start. So I think the answer is yes, it is worth doing, and maybe it's most worth doing for the benefits that people don't realise they're going to get in the first place. So the system's fine because they're still making the decision, but actually it's interesting that I think that the value of international higher education is much broader than people realise, which I think is a great thing because I think that will contribute to making it happen well into the future. Because a lot of decisions will be made also. I mean, I've put all this information up there, but actually the best bit of information perhaps is when they read a testimonial about somebody who did it and talking about what a wonderful time they had and what a great experience it was, and that encourages them then to make that final commitment and effort to go and do it. So I hope I've made you look at something that you already know in a slightly different way, and thank you very much for your time.